press briefing room at the White House was packed tighter than usual. Journalists lined the walls, their notepads and microphones poised for headlines. Cameras zoomed in on the now iconic podium where Karoline Leavitt, the youngest and fiercest White House press secretary in U.S. history, was expected to address the press. Since President Donald Trump had returned to the White House for a second non-consecutive term, every media briefing had become a political battlefield. And Karoline, sharp, unflinching, unapologetic, was Trump's chosen warrior. With every answer, she dismantled legacy media narratives and won fans across conservative America. But today's energy was different. Kristen Welker of NBC News, host of Meet the Press, had arrived unannounced. Word spread fast that she intended to challenge Leavitt on Trump's controversial comments from a recent campaign rally in Florida. The line of questioning wasn't just political. It was personal, pointed, and meant to hit the administration where it hurt. The moment Karoline stepped to the podium in a fitted navy blue blazer, a hush fell. She looked directly into the crowd with a calm, knowing smirk. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's make this quick. I have a real job to do after this," she began, prompting a few awkward chuckles from reporters. Before anyone else could raise a hand, Kristen Welker stood, her NBC mic already in hand. "Madam Press Secretary, a question regarding President Trump's remarks last night. He referred to certain members of the media as, quote, the enemy of the people again. Given the heightened tensions in the country, do you acknowledge that such language endangers journalists?" The room froze. Karoline didn't even blink. She slowly leaned into the podium, hands clasped in front of her. "Kristen," she said with a tone that sounded oddly like a teacher about to correct a student, "the president calls out dishonesty and manipulation. That's not endangering journalists. That's standing up for the American people who have been lied to for decades." Kristen pushed forward. "But doesn't this kind of language delegitimize the press, which is essential to democracy?" Karoline's smile widened, but her tone turned surgical. "What delegitimizes the press, Kristen, is when so-called journalists spend 4 years pushing a Russian collusion hoax, ignore the Hunter Biden laptop story, and gaslight Americans about inflation, crime, and border security. That's not journalism. That's activism." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Kristen's lips tightened. She pressed again. "With all due respect, this isn't about the Hunter Biden laptop. This is about the president's dangerous rhetoric. Are you denying that his words have consequences?" Karoline paused. This was the moment. She straightened her back and delivered the hammer. "You want to talk about consequences? Let's talk about how NBC edited 911 calls to push a false racial narrative. Let's talk about how you platformed people who openly called Trump supporters terrorists. And let's talk about how, on your show, you routinely mischaracterized Trump's policies while conveniently ignoring this administration's achievements. Record job numbers, secure borders, energy independence restored. That's your record, Kristen. And it's why trust in mainstream media is at an all-time low." Gasps turned to murmurs. Kristen's face flushed crimson. Her mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came. Her producer tried to motion her to sit, but she shook him off. Karoline wasn't done. "You don't get to lecture us on democracy, Kristen. The American people saw through your network's bias in 2016. They saw it again in 2020. And now in 2024, they put President Trump back in office because they are tired of media elites treating them like second-class citizens. So if you're looking for someone to blame, maybe start with your own newsroom." Kristen's jaw clenched. Her mic lowered slowly. Then, in a move that shocked even the seasoned reporters in the room, she turned and walked straight out, no follow-up, no closing remarks. Just silence and the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway. Cameras caught it all. Within minutes, the clip went viral on X, TikTok, and YouTube under the hashtag Kristen Storms Out. The moment Kristen Welker stormed off, the room descended into chaos. Reporters whispered urgently among themselves, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts, and producers scrambled to send clips to their network HQs. No one had seen a walkout like this since the press briefings of the early Trump era. But Karoline Leavitt stood composed, flipping to the next reporter with the same calm she might use ordering coffee. "Yes, James from the Daily Caller?" she said with a slight nod. James hesitated, still processing what had just happened. Yes. Thank you, Karoline. Just wow, first of all. Second, How does the administration respond to claims that the president is intentionally provoking the media for political gain? Karoline smirked. James, provoking the media? The media has been provoking President Trump since the escalator ride in 2015. All he's ever done is shine a light on their hypocrisy. The truth is not an attack. It's a mirror. Cameras kept rolling, and Karoline, sensing the moment, closed the briefing with signature flair. That's all for today, folks. Some of us actually have to go run the country. She stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking with confidence, leaving the press corps stunned, and Kristen Welker's empty seat in the front row symbolizing something far bigger. 2 hours later, MSNBC newsroom, New York City. Kristen Welker sat in her dressing room, phone in hand, watching her own storm out on loop. Her inbox was flooded. Messages from allies, critics, and worse, top brass at NBC. The network wasn't angry. They were worried. A knock at the door. It was NBC's senior producer, Greg Tomlinson. He entered cautiously, holding a tablet. "Kristen, this thing's gone nuclear," he said. "I know," she replied coldly, not taking her eyes off the screen. "The alt-right is cheering like it's the Super Bowl." Greg handed her the tablet. On the screen was a live poll from an independent media monitor. Who won the White House briefing clash? Karoline Leavitt, 74%. Kristen Welker, 16%. Unsure, 10%. Below it, the headline of the day on dozens of conservative websites. Karoline KOS Kristen, legacy media embarrassed on national stage. Kristen read it twice, her jaw tightening. "They're spinning this like I was unprepared." Greg hesitated. "Were you?" Kristen shot him a glare. He backed off. "Sorry, I just..." Karoline knew exactly where to hit. She had quotes, facts, video receipts. "And the Hunter thing, she baited you into it." "I didn't walk out because she got under my skin," Kristen lied. "I walked out because that wasn't a briefing, it was a Trump rally disguised as policy." Greg gave her a long look. "Kristen, you have to go on air tonight and do damage control. America needs to hear your side." Later that night, NBC's Nightline special. Kristen sat across from Rachel Maddow in the NBC studio. The segment was marketed as Media Under Fire. Kristen Welker responds. After a montage showing the clash with Karoline, Rachel turned to her. "Kristen, millions of Americans watched you leave the White House podium today. Can you walk us through what happened?" Kristen looked directly into the camera. "I walked out because what we witnessed wasn't transparency. It was propaganda. Karoline Leavitt isn't just Trump's press secretary. She's his attack dog. And today she did what Trump trained her to do. Discredit, deflect, and destroy." Rachel nodded sympathetically, but the segment didn't have the effect NBC hoped. Across social media, viewers didn't buy it. Comments flooded in. Why didn't Kristen just defend herself with facts? Karoline roasted her with receipts. Welker had nothing. Walking out proves she lost. By morning, a meme of Karoline at the podium with the caption, "Press Secretary 1, Media 0, was trending #1 in the U.S. Back in Washington, the White House next morning. Karoline sat in her West Wing office, sipping black coffee, scrolling through reactions. Donald Trump himself had reposted the exchange on Truth Social with the caption, "Kristen Welker, totally owned. Great job, Karoline. Our press SEC is strong, smart, and won't take media lies. Mega. United States." Her phone buzzed. It was a call from Trump. "Karoline," came his booming voice. "That was one of the greatest takedowns in history. Reagan would be proud. You made CNN, MSNBC. All of them look like fools." "Thank you, Mr. President," Karoline said, hiding a smile. "Just doing my job." Trump laughed. "Keep doing it. The people love it. And they love you." Day 3, Washington echoes with aftershocks. It had only been 48 hours since the epic clash between NBC's Kristen Welker and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, but it already felt historic. Cable networks spun it relentlessly. Conservative outlets hailed Karoline as the warrior of truth, while mainstream networks tried to steer attention back toward Trump's remarks, but the damage had already been done. Kristen's stormout had gone viral in ways her team hadn't imagined. Political cartoonists had a field day. One showed Kristen drowning in a pool labeled Facts, with Karoline standing above her holding a lifebuoy that read, Truth Hurts. At college campuses, conservative groups played the video during rallies. Conservative influencers flooded TikTok and X with breakdowns of Karoline's power moves and rhetorical technique. There were even side-by-side comparisons of Karoline's mic drop moments to historical speeches by Reagan, Thatcher, and even JFK. Meanwhile, at NBC headquarters in Manhattan, an emergency strategy meeting was underway. NBC Crisis Conference Room, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, NYC. Kristen sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted. Network executives, PR handlers, and legal advisors surrounded her. On the wall was a giant flat screen showing headline after headline praising Karoline Leavitt School's legacy media. Kristen Welker walkout backfires. Press secretary unleashes Trumpian truth bombs. Bob Halperin, NBC's president of news, cleared his throat. We've got to pivot, Kristen. Fast. Kristen raised an eyebrow. To what? More Trump bashing? That didn't work for 4 elections. No, Bob said firmly. To accountability journalism. Real stories. Policy breakdowns. The people are done with emotional outrage. Karoline exposed that. Kristen clenched her jaw. You're saying she was right? I'm saying the audience thinks she was. That's the reality. We need to regroup. Another executive, Susan Valdez, jumped in. We're getting hammered in focus groups. Independents especially think Karoline came off as sharp and fact-based. You came off rattled. Kristen felt the sting. But deep down, she knew it was true. Back in D.C., Karoline's rise continues. The next morning, Karoline appeared on Fox and Friends looking poised and refreshed. We've always believed in transparency, she said calmly. What happened at that press briefing wasn't a fight. It was a moment of reckoning. The American people want answers. They want honesty. And I'm not afraid to give it to them. Co-host Brian Kilmeade grinned. Karoline, you didn't just give it to them. You body-slammed the entire media establishment with a smile. Twitter lit up again. Hashtag Karoline 2028 even trended briefly, with some conservatives floating the idea of a political future beyond the podium. Later that day, Karoline was briefed by Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and National Security Advisor Rick Grenell on upcoming events. But it was the call from Trump that took her by surprise. The Oval Office that afternoon. Karoline stepped into the familiar room where the gold curtains glowed in the sunlight. President Trump stood by the resolute desk, smiling ear to ear. There she is, he said. The media assassin. Karoline laughed. Just doing the job, Mr. President. He motioned for her to sit. Listen, you've become the face of this administration's communication. And it's not just MAGA suburban moms, swing voters, even young Gen Z influencers. They're tuning in because you're unapologetically real. We need to think about where this could go. Karoline blinked. Sir? Trump leaned in. Ever think about running for office someday? Karoline chuckled. I'm not sure America's ready for that. Trump pointed a finger. Oh, they will be. After that performance? You're not just press secretary. You're a movement. Meanwhile, Kristen's returned to the battlefield. That same evening, Kristen Welker made a return to the White House briefing room. All eyes were on her. She walked in slowly, microphone in hand, her expression unreadable. Karoline noticed her instantly but didn't flinch. She gestured. Kristen, welcome back. Glad you decided to stay for the whole show this time. Laughter erupted across the room, even from some of the more traditionally liberal reporters. Kristen steadied herself and asked, Ms. Leavitt, in the spirit of transparency, does the president believe that a free press can function without confrontation from the executive branch? Karoline smiled. Absolutely. But it must be a free press, not a biased one. We have no issue with tough questions. Just be prepared for tougher answers. Another mic drop. Kristen nodded. Fair enough. This time, she didn't storm out. But the damage was already done. The media landscape was shifting. That one press briefing had become a defining moment, not just for Karoline Leavitt, but for how the American public perceived the ongoing power struggle between legacy media and the Trump administration. In conservative circles, Karoline was being praised not just as a press secretary, but as a culture warrior, a poised, articulate woman who refused to play by the media's rules. A viral meme had taken over, Karoline pointing toward Kristen with the caption, "You wanted a question. I gave you an answer." That morning, the Washington Post grudgingly admitted in an editorial. Leavitt may have crossed a line rhetorically, but she also tapped into a deeper frustration among Americans who feel the media too often pushes a narrative rather than reports facts. Meanwhile, in a West Virginia diner, a middle-aged coal miner named Joe Hayward told a local reporter, "I don't care about all that political mumbo-jumbo. But that girl, Karoline? She talked like she knew we were listening. She didn't run. The other lady did. The West Wing, behind closed doors." Chief strategist Steve Cortez sat down with Karoline in her office near the West Wing. "Karoline, you've changed the game," he said bluntly. Karoline raised an eyebrow. "We're just telling the truth." Cortez shook his head. "No, it's more than that. You've made the media chase us instead of us chasing them. The president's approval rating among independents just jumped 6 points. You know how rare that is." She leaned back, processing the weight of what he was saying. "Some in the party think you should headline the 2025 pack. That's normally reserved for governors, senators, big names." Karoline blinked. "You're serious?" Cortez leaned in. "Dead serious. You don't just defend the president. You inspire the base." Kristen's countermove, damage control, begins. At NBC, Kristen Welker wasn't giving up. She'd taken the hit, sure, but she wasn't about to be remembered as the reporter who lost a battle and went silent. She agreed to a sit-down interview with Vanity Fair where she framed the incident as a moment of raw emotion. "I walked out because I felt the conversation had become hostile," she said. "But I also recognize now that walking out sent the wrong signal." The article ran under the headline, "Welker regrets storm out, calls for constructive confrontation with power." While some journalists and viewers sympathized with her, many didn't. The damage had been viral. Memes outpaced apologies. And Kristen's credibility was still under fire. The people speak. Back on the streets of Milwaukee, Dallas, Tampa, and Boise, Karoline's name kept coming up in focus groups and online polls. A young mother in Georgia told a local radio station, "I don't always agree with Trump, but that press secretary? She didn't let the media bully her. That matters. I want my daughter to see women like her." On X, formerly Twitter, a trending topic read, #Karoline effect when the truth doesn't flinch. Even late-night hosts reluctantly began referencing Karoline's rise. Stephen Colbert made a crack. "Karoline Leavitt, proof that you don't need facts when you have volume and timing." But the audience's laughter was tepid. Americans were beginning to wonder, was this more than a soundbite? Leavitt versus Welker, round 2? Speculation began that Kristen Welker was preparing a long-form investigative piece aimed at the White House, possibly a televised Dateline special that would feature former administration officials critical of Trump. But Karoline's office was ready. Her staff, now nicknamed the Leavitt League by conservative influencers, had prepared pre-bunking responses, data packets, and counter-narratives. Karoline smiled when she heard the rumor. "Let them come," she said. "If they want round 2, they'd better come with facts, not feelings." A White House dinner with purpose. That evening, President Trump hosted a private dinner for senior staff and cabinet members in the state dining room. The conversation wasn't about policy, inflation, or even foreign affairs. It was about narrative, about legacy. Trump raised his glass. To Karoline Leavitt, the woman who stared down the entire mainstream media and didn't blink. Applause echoed through the historic room. Kristen walked out, Trump said, pausing for effect. Karoline walked in and took over. Karoline smiled, humbled but unwavering. She wasn't in it for the fame. She believed in the mission. The war over truth and perception was only heating up. And she was just getting started.